once again for getting me on here, do a little more playing. I wanted to talk about a few other things. I've been getting a lot of emails about both chords, how they're made and how to use them, and soloing ideas. So I thought I'd talk about both of those things real quick. First, chords. If everybody knows their major scale or minor scale, a chord is built by taking the first, third, fifth, and seventh, or every other note in the scale. You play them together, you get a chord. So I'm going to talk about, there's 4 primary chord types. There's a lot of types of chords, but as bass players, in my opinion, there's really just 4 types you really need to worry about, at least right off the bat. The first is major, so it'll be the first, third, fifth, seventh of a major scale. There's dominant, first, third, fifth, and flat 7. And that's a chord symbol you see if it's just like A and a 7. That's a dominant chord. Minor, you flat the third and the 7th. And every once in a while you'll see a half diminished or flat, minor 7, flat 5. So 1, flat 3, flat 5, flat 7. So that being said, when I started getting into chords, I started figuring out all the shapes that worked for me on bass. And I kind of viewed them as, you know, like a 4-string shape was a shape that spanned 4 strings. So I'd figure out all the different ways to play each type of chord on that 4-string or 3-string or 5-string or 6-string span. So say 3-string shapes, I'd figure out, say that's a D major 7, I just play D, the 3rd, and the major 7th, leaving out the 5th, because the 3rd and the 7th are really the notes that give the chord its quality. And so you take that, you flat the 7, you get a dominant chord, you flat the 3rd and the 7th, you get a minor chord. Maybe instead of playing that flat 3, play that flat 5 and the flat 7. That's very obviously the half diminished chord. So I would take that and figure out shapes for all over the bass, say 4-string shapes. I'd take major, dominant, minor, half diminished. Same thing with 4-string shapes. And 6-string shapes even. So I'll give you some ideas. And initially, I'm primarily using the root on the bottom, 3rd and the 7th up top. Usually like on that shape, 1, 7, and the 3rd is an octave higher. But there's also what we call inversions, where you can put other notes on the bottom. It doesn't have to be the root. So we could take that, say that A minor 7 chord, say we want to put the 3rd in the bottom. So we could put the C, E, and the A. That has a completely different sound to it. Technically you could still play that over an A minor chord. So also some things to experiment with. Now one of the best ways I've found to get comfortable with chords is trying to use them in context. So whether or not you ever aspire to play jazz, I've always found jazz tunes to be the best things to practice. One, because they're difficult and harmonically they move around a lot, so it keeps you working. Tune like Autumn Leaves is a great tune to play over because it has all the primary chord types. It has minor chords, major chords, dominant chords, and the minor 7, flat 5. It has both major and minor 2, 5, so it kind of covers all the bases. So we grab a real book. I have a real book over here. Say I just want to practice my chords over a tune like Autumn Leaves. Now first, generally I think it's good to practice in time with the metronome, but I think when you're first getting to know something, to free yourself up from constraints and just try and get comfortable with it first. So maybe just take the tune and figure out the best way to play through the changes, and eventually get to a point where maybe you can play them in time. 2, 3, 4. experiment with that. And you'll notice I was walking my chords up. What I'm doing there is I'm taking, we talked a little bit about modes last time. If you take a mode and you lay it out, say C major, starting from C major. Then we have D Dorian, E Phrygian, and all the way up. If you lay each one of those scales and chords out, you get and figure out the chords corresponding to each one. You can actually play play seventh chords all the way through the mode. So, example, we start with the C major. If we make a seventh chord out of the D Dorian, we get another minor chord, E Phrygian, essentially minor. F Lydian winds up being major. G Mixolydian winds up being dominant. A minor, minor obviously. And B Locrian, we can do that minor 7 flat 5. So whenever I'm playing through a tune, and if I wind up walking up chords, essentially what I'm doing is thinking diatonically, thinking of chords that are appropriate for that. If I was building a scale off of that chord, like that A minor 7, so I'd think of that as minor, that B Locrian, and the C major. So that's what I'm doing there, just to fill you in on that a little bit. I also find it very useful when playing through standards to try and incorporate the chords and the bass line, because that really just gets your brain working, and it's tough. So, for example, thinking like a jazz guitarist might, 1, 2, 3, 4. Experiment with that. That's a lot of fun, and it's, the key is remembering that it's practice, and it's not going to sound good, and it can sound really corny even, but as long as you're challenging yourself and you're not just practicing all the things that you're good at, it'll be rewarding. You'll get something out of it. Learning how to play through changes applies to every style of music, whether you ever want to do a standard jazz gig or not. Alright, so now I wanted to talk a little bit about soloing. Now we can kind of borrow from what we were just talking about with chords and practicing them over a jazz tune. A big part of soloing is being comfortable harmonically and being solid harmonically, so you can just relax and let your creative ear take over, so you're not thinking about it too much. And I found again a good way to get comfortable harmonically is to practice playing over jazz tunes. And I've never considered myself necessarily a standard, straight-ahead jazz musician, but an improvising musician, so I find playing over jazz tunes to be a lot of fun and really challenging. So, just like we were talking about practicing playing chords over a standard like Autumn Leaves, I also try and get my students, and anyway I talk to this about, to get really comfortable playing all their arpeggios over a tune. First in root position, so we have A minor 7 to D7 to G major 7. So I'll just take those changes. So I'll play my minor arpeggio, dominant, D7, and G major. So it's a good walking exercise, it's a good solo exercise. When it comes to soloing, we don't want to always jump back down to the root of each chord. We got to try and get ourselves out of the bass player frame of mind for soloing. So I also like to, after I finish that first chord,